The diamond was 5 carats, flawless, and cost more than most people earn in a decade. Julian Thorne stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the city's elite, down on one knee. He wasn't proposing to his wife. He was proposing to his 23-year-old mistress, convinced that his divorce was just a formality he could buy his way out of. The crowd gasped. The cameras flashed. It was the perfect moment until the heavy oak doors swung open. Julian smiled, expecting security. Instead, in walked his wife, Eleanor. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a manila envelope, and inside wasn't just a divorce decree. It was the deed to the very building Julian was standing in. By the time the night ended, Julian wouldn't just be single, he'd be homeless. This is how the King of Wall Street lost his crown in exactly 3 minutes. The chandeliers inside the Grand Sterling Hotel ballroom didn't just sparkle, they dripped with history and old money. This was the charity event of the season, the Sapphire Gala, where New York's most influential power players gathered to drink champagne that cost $1,000 a bottle and pretend to care about philanthropic causes. For Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Enterprises, tonight wasn't about charity. It was about consolidation. It was about stepping into the next phase of his life, a phase that didn't include his wife of 20 years, Eleanor. Julian adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of a dark window. At 45, he looked good. He had the kind of aggressive, sharp-jawed handsomeness that money preserves well. He checked his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe. It was 8:15 p.m. Eleanor was currently in Aspen, or so he thought, visiting her ailing mother. He had sent her there on a private jet 3 days ago, insisting she take time for family. It was a generous gesture, he told himself. A kindness. It also cleared the board for what he was about to do. "You look nervous." A soft voice purred beside him. Julian turned to see Isabella Ricci. At 23, she was a vision of calculated perfection. She wore a dress made of red silk that seemed to defy physics, clinging to her in a way that made every other woman in the room look dowdy. Isabella was an aspiring model, an Instagram influencer, and for the last 6 months, the center of Julian's universe. "I'm not nervous," Julian lied, smoothing his tuxedo jacket. "I'm just waiting for the right moment." Isabella took a sip of her champagne, her eyes scanning the room. She loved this. She loved the stares of the older women, the envious glances of the men. She knew what they whispered, that she was a gold digger, a homewrecker. She didn't care. In an hour, she wouldn't just be the mistress, she would be the fiancée of a billionaire. "Make sure it's big, Julian," she whispered, leaning close to his ear. "I want them all to see. Especially the ones who said you'd never leave her." "They'll see," Julian promised, his hand brushing the velvet box in his pocket. He looked out at the crowd. He saw Senator Davis laughing near the bar. He saw the CEO of Bank of America shaking hands with a tech mogul. These were his peers, his kingdom, and he was about to rewrite the rules. In Julian's mind, he had already won. He had consulted with his lawyer, Marcus Sterling, just that morning. The prenup he and Eleanor had signed 2 decades ago was, according to Julian's memory, heavily weighted in his favor. He was the breadwinner. He was the face of the company. Eleanor was just the woman who stayed home, organized the dinner parties, and raised their daughter Sophie, who was now away at college in London. Julian respected Eleanor in a distant, patronizing way. She was a good mother, a decent partner. But she was stale. She was safe. Isabella was a firework. And Julian, in his midlife arrogance, decided he deserved fireworks. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the ambient chatter. "If we could have everyone's attention for the main auction." "It's time," Julian said, grabbing Isabella's hand. "Now?" she asked, her eyes widening. "During the auction?" "I'm going to donate $1 million to the hospital," Julian said, his chest swelling. "And then I'm going to ask you to marry me. We'll be on the front page of every paper in the city tomorrow." He led her toward the stage. The crowd parted for them. Julian Thorne was a man people moved for. He thrived on this deference. He felt invincible. He felt like a god walking among mortals. What Julian didn't know, as he stepped onto the platform and took the microphone from a confused MC, was that the text message he had sent to his lawyer earlier that day, confirming the surprise, had been intercepted. He didn't know that Eleanor wasn't in Aspen. He didn't know that the private jet he had arranged for her had been diverted. And he certainly didn't know that the building he was standing in, the Grand Sterling Hotel, had changed ownership that very morning. Julian tapped the microphone. The feedback screech silenced the room. "Forgive the interruption," Julian said, flashing his $1,000,000 smile. The spotlight hit him, blindingly bright. He squeezed Isabella's hand. She looked up at him with practiced adoration. "I know we are here for charity, and I pledge right now $1,000,000 to the Children's Wing in the name of Thorne Enterprises." Applause broke out. Polite, enthusiastic applause. Julian waited for it to die down. "But," he continued, his voice dropping to a more intimate register, "I am also here for something else. Something personal. They say love strikes you when you least expect it. They say it makes you do crazy things." He turned to Isabella. The room went silent. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew Julian was married. Everyone knew Eleanor. The scandal was vibrating in the air like electricity. "Isabella," Julian said, dropping to one knee. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Phones shot up into the air, recording the moment. "You have brought light back into my life," Julian recited the lines he had practiced in the mirror. "You are my muse, my heart. I know the path here hasn't been conventional, but true love never is." He opened the box. The 5-carat diamond caught the spotlight and refracted it into 1,000 rainbows. "Isabella Ricci, will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you marry me?" Isabella brought her hands to her mouth, feigning shock perfectly. "Yes," she screamed. "Yes, Julian, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. He stood up and kissed her passionately. The applause was scattered, confused. Some people clapped out of habit. Others whispered furiously to their neighbors. It was the most audacious, disrespectful public display anyone had seen in New York society in years. Julian broke the kiss and raised his fist in triumph. He looked at the camera flashing in the front row. He was ready for the headlines. Then the sound of slow, rhythmic clapping cut through the noise. Clap, clap, clap. It was coming from the main entrance. The double doors, 10 feet tall and made of solid mahogany, were pushed open. But not by staff. Standing there, framed by the hallway light, was a woman in a black tuxedo suit, sharp, tailored, menacing. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her lips were painted a dark, blood red. It was Eleanor. The silence that fell over the ballroom was heavier than the silence before the proposal. This was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet of a predator entering a clearing. Julian froze. His hand was still gripping Isabella's waist, but his fingers went numb. Eleanor didn't look like the woman he had sent to Aspen. That woman wore cashmere sweaters and pearls. That woman spoke softly and worried about garden clubs. The woman walking toward the stage now moved with the lethal grace of a panther. The black tuxedo suit she wore was Yves Saint Laurent, cut to emphasize power, not just femininity. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was smiling. And it was the coldest smile Julian had ever seen. "Eleanor?" Julian's voice cracked over the microphone, which he was still holding. The sound amplified his fear for everyone to hear. "Hello, Julian," Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't amplified, but it carried perfectly in the dead silence of the room. "Please don't stop on my account. It was quite a show." She walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for her faster than they had for Julian. They sensed authority. Isabella looked at Julian, panic flickering in her eyes. "You said she was in Aspen?" she hissed. "I thought she was," Julian stammered, lowering the microphone, though not realizing it was still live in his other hand. Eleanor reached the foot of the stage. She looked up at them, From this angle, she should have looked small. Instead, she looked like a giant. "Aspen is lovely this time of year," Eleanor said, climbing the stairs to the stage. She moved deliberately. "But the legal counsel in Zurich is much more efficient." "Zurich?" Julian frowned. "Why were you in Zurich?" Eleanor reached the center of the stage. She stood 3 feet from them. She glanced at the massive diamond on Isabella's finger. 5 carats, Eleanor noted dryly. Cushion cut, VVS1 clarity. Purchased from Graff on 5th Avenue 3 days ago using the corporate account. Specifically, the entertainment and client relations budget. The crowd murmured. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere in the back. Julian's face went red. "Eleanor, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," Eleanor interrupted, her voice turning sharp as glass. "You wanted an audience, Julian. You invited the press. You wanted everyone to witness your true love. Well, I'm just here to provide the wedding gift." She lifted the manila envelope she had been holding at her side. "What is that?" Julian asked, eyeing the packet warily. "Divorce papers," Eleanor said brightly. "I signed them an hour ago." Julian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. A laugh, almost hysterical, escaped him. "Is that it? You're serving me here? Fine. Give them to me. I'll sign them. I was going to send them to you on Monday anyway." He regained some of his composure. He was Julian Thorne. He could handle a divorce. He had the best lawyers in the city. "You really are arrogant," Eleanor said, shaking her head with mock pity. "You think this is just about ending the marriage?" "Julian, darling, you haven't read the papers." "I don't need to read them," Julian scoffed. "We have a prenup. I keep what I earned. You get the house in the Hamptons and a stipend. It's standard." Isabella, feeling the shift in power, stepped forward, linking her arm through Julian's. "He doesn't love you anymore," she said, her voice shrill. "Just take your papers and leave. You're embarrassing yourself." Eleanor turned her gaze to Isabella. It was a look of such profound dismissal that Isabella actually took a step back. "I'm not talking to the staff, dear," Eleanor said. The crowd erupted in shocked laughter. Isabella's face turned crimson. Eleanor turned back to Julian. "The prenup," she said, savoring the word. "Yes, the one we signed 20 years ago. The one drafted by your father's lawyer." "Exactly," Julian said. "Ironclad." "It was," Eleanor agreed, "until you violated the moral turpitude clause, Section 8, Paragraph 4. Julian frowned. "The what?" "You didn't read it, did you?" Eleanor asked softly. "You never read the fine print, Julian. You always assume you're the smartest person in the room. The clause states that if either party engages in a public affair that brings significant reputational damage to the family name, specifically a public proposal to a paramour while still legally married, the prenup is voided." Julian felt a cold sweat break out on his back. "That's archaic. That wouldn't hold up in court." "It would," a deep voice called out from the side of the stage. Julian whipped his head around. Standing in the wings was Marcus Sterling, Julian's own lawyer, or rather, the man he thought was his lawyer. "Marcus?" Julian asked, betrayed. "What are you doing here?" "I'm representing the majority shareholder, Julian," Marcus said, stepping into the light. He looked apologetic, but only slightly. "I advised you not to do this public proposal. I sent you 3 emails. You didn't read them." "Majority shareholder?" Julian looked back at Eleanor. "I'm the majority shareholder of Thorne Enterprises. I own 51%. Eleanor opened the envelope. She pulled out a thick document. "Actually, you own 49%, Eleanor corrected him. "You forgot about the 2% your mother left in a trust. A trust that transfers to the female head of household upon her death." Julian's blood ran cold. His mother had passed away 6 months ago. He had been too busy with Isabella to deal with the estate execution details. He had assumed it would just roll over to him. "You have the voting rights," Eleanor said, holding up the document. "I have the 51%. And as of this morning's emergency board meeting, which you missed because you were ring shopping, I am the new chairwoman of the board." The camera flashes were blinding now. Every second of this was being live-streamed. You can't do this," Julian whispered. "Thorne Enterprises is me. I built it." "You inherited it," Eleanor corrected. "And then you leveraged it to buy yachts and diamonds for teenagers." She took a step closer. "But that's not the best part, Julian." She reached into the envelope again. "There's more?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. "There's always more." Julian stared at the manila envelope as if it were a bomb. In many ways, it was. The silence in the grand Sterling ballroom had shifted from shocked paralysis to a low, buzzing hum of anticipation. New York's elite were no longer just observers. They were vultures circling a carcass, and Julian Thorne was the meat. What more could there be? Julian demanded, his voice trying to find the commanding baritone he used in boardrooms, but landing somewhere near a petulant whine. "You have the voting rights? Fine. We'll fight that in court. I still have my assets. I still have my personal holdings." Eleanor laughed. It was a light, airy sound that terrified him more than her shouting would have. She signaled to a man standing in the shadows of the stage wings. It was Jerry, the head of security for Thorne Enterprises, a man Julian had employed for 15 years. A man Julian had tipped generously every Christmas. Jerry stepped forward, but he didn't look at Julian. He looked at Eleanor. He gave her a sharp nod of deference. "Julian," Eleanor said, her voice projecting clearly, "do you know who owns the Grand Sterling Hotel?" "The Sterling Group," Julian scoffed. "Old money. Irrelevant." "The Sterling Group was acquired in a hostile takeover at 9 a.m. this morning," Eleanor corrected him, "by a holding company called Nemesis LLC. Do you want to guess who the sole proprietor of Nemesis LLC is?" Isabella's grip on Julian's arm tightened painfully. "Julian, what is she saying?" "She's saying," Eleanor answered for him, stepping closer so that only the microphone picked up her icy tone, "that you are currently trespassing on my private property, and I have a strict no solicitation policy, especially for men soliciting their mistresses." "You can't kick me out," Julian snarled, his face reddening. "I paid for this event. I paid for the catering, the staff, the champagne." "Actually," Eleanor interjected, pulling a black American Express Centurion card from her tuxedo pocket. Julian recognized it immediately. It was the primary account card, the one his supplementary card was attached to. "You paid with this account, the joint account, which, due to the filing of divorce proceedings and the activation of the fraudulent dissipation of assets protocol, has been frozen as of, let's see," she checked her diamond-encrusted watch, 10 minutes ago." Julian instinctively reached for his wallet. He pulled out his own black card. He looked at the bartender, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. "Run a tab," Julian shouted at the staff, waving his card. "Run it for $10,000. Prove her wrong." The bartender looked at Eleanor. Eleanor gave a barely perceptible nod. The bartender took the card, swiped it, and waited. The machine beeped a loud, dissonant crunch sound. "Declined, sir," the bartender said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "Try it again," Julian screamed. "It's declined, sir. Code 05. Do not honor. Seize card." The bartender held onto the card. "Give that back!" Julian lunged forward, but Jerry, the head of security, stepped in between them. Jerry was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. He put a heavy hand on Julian's chest. "Mr. Thorne," Jerry said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "I'm going to have to ask you to step back." "Jerry, are you kidding me? I pay your salary." "Actually, sir," Jerry said, "Mrs. Thorne signed the payroll authorization this afternoon, and she gave the entire security team a 20% raise. Now, please, don't make a scene." "Don't make a scene?" Julian looked around the room. Hundreds of phones were recording. He saw the flashbulbs. He saw the sneers of his rivals. He saw the pity in the eyes of his friends. Isabella was trembling. She looked down at the ring on her finger, the only thing of value she currently had access to. She tried to pull her hand away from Julian, creating a subtle distance between them. "This is ridiculous," Isabella muttered, her voice shaky. "Julian, let's just go. Let's go to the penthouse." Eleanor's ears perked up. "Ah, the penthouse. 432 Park Avenue. Floor 82. Yes," Julian said, straightening his jacket, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "My home, which is in my name." "Technically," Eleanor said, pacing back and forth on the stage like a professor lecturing a slow student, "the deed is in the name of J&E Trust, and the bylaws of the trust state that in the event of a marital dispute, the property is to remain the primary residence of the custodial parent of any minor children, or, in our case, the parent designated as the primary caregiver of our daughter Sophie." "Sophie is 20, Julian argued. "She's in London." "And who pays her tuition?" Eleanor asked. "Who pays her rent? Who manages her trust fund?" "Me. Legally, I am the primary financial guardian." "But that's a boring legal argument, Julian. The more immediate problem for you is that I had the biometric locks changed an hour ago." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "You changed the locks? And I had your personal effects relocated," Eleanor added. "Relocated where?" "To the curb," Eleanor said simply. "Well, not the curb. That would be littering. Your assistant, Brenda, who, by the way, despises you for making her buy lingerie for your mistress, kindly packed your bags. They are currently waiting for you in the lobby of the Motel 6 in Queens. I prepaid for 2 nights. I'm not a monster." The laughter from the crowd was raucous now. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was entertainment. They were watching the public execution of an ego. Isabella pulled her arm violently away from Julian. "The Motel 6? She screeched. "I'm not staying at a Motel 6. "It's just temporary, baby," Julian pleaded, reaching for her. "I'll fix this. I'll call the bank in the morning. It's just a glitch." "It's not a glitch, Julian," Eleanor said, stepping to the edge of the stage, looming over them. "It's a foreclosure. On your life." She turned to Jerry. "Escort Mr. Thorne and his fiancée off the premises. If they resist, call the NYPD. I believe trespassing is still a crime in this city." Jerry grabbed Julian's arm. Another security guard, a woman named Maria, stepped toward Isabella. "Don't touch me," Isabella snapped, gathering her red silk skirt. "I can walk myself out." She turned and marched toward the exit, her heels clicking rapidly. She didn't wait for Julian. She didn't look back. Julian stood there for one last second. He looked at Eleanor. For 20 years she had been his shadow. Now she was the sun, and he was burning. "You'll regret this, Eleanor," he hissed. "I built you." "You didn't build me, Julian," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You just stood in my light. Goodbye." Jerry shoved him forward. Julian stumbled, caught his balance, and walked the longest walk of his life. The walk of shame usually referred to morning after regrets. This was a walk of ruin. Every face he passed was a mixture of amusement and judgment. He saw cameras flashing in his face, blinding him. He pushed through the heavy mahogany doors, leaving the sapphire gala behind. The cool night air of New York City hit him, but it didn't cool the burning shame on his face. On the sidewalk, Isabella was frantically tapping on her phone, trying to call an Uber. "Bella," Julian said, reaching for her. She spun around, her eyes blazing. "My credit card isn't working," she spat. "You linked it to your account. It's declined. I can't even get a ride home." "I'll get a taxi," Julian said, patting his pockets. He realized he had no cash. He never carried cash. He was a billionaire. He didn't need cash. "You don't have any money, do you?" Isabella asked, her voice quiet, realizing the horror of her situation. It's temporary, Julian insisted. By Monday I'll have access to the offshore accounts. Eleanor doesn't know about the Caymans. You better hope so, Isabella said, looking at the massive diamond on her finger. She twisted it nervously. Because if you think I'm going to live in a motel with you, you're out of your mind. A yellow taxi slowed down. Julian waved it down desperately. He opened the door. Get in, he said. Where are we going? To the office, Julian said, a dark determination settling in his eyes. I keep a safe in my office. Cash, gold, passports. If she wants a war, I'll give her a war. The taxi ride to the Thorne Enterprises Tower in Midtown Manhattan was silent and suffocating. The driver, a man named Gupta, who was listening to a podcast about cryptocurrency, had no idea that the man in his back seat had just lost a fortune greater than the GDP of a small country. Isabella sat as far away from Julian as the back seat allowed. She was scrolling through Twitter, now X. Oh my God, she whispered. Don't look at it, Julian commanded, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. It's everywhere, Julian. Thorne down. Eleanor's revenge. There's a video of you getting declined at the bar. It has 2 million views already. She turned the screen toward him. Look at the comments. They're calling me the dollar store duchess. Stop it. Julian swiped the phone away. It doesn't matter what the internet thinks. It matters what the board thinks. And once I get into that building, I can fix this. The taxi pulled up to the sleek, glass monolith that was Thorne Tower. It was 60 stories of steel and arrogance. Julian felt a surge of relief. This was his castle. Eleanor couldn't take this. Wait here, Julian told the driver. I'll be back in 10 minutes with cash. Meter running, Gupta said indifferently. Julian marched up to the revolving doors. He pushed through into the lobby. The night shift security guard, a young man named Kevin, was sitting at the desk. Evening, Kevin, Julian said, breezing past the turnstiles. He reached for his ID badge to scan it. Beep, beep, beep. Red light. Julian frowned. He swiped again. Beep, beep, beep. Red light. Kevin, the turnstile is broken. Buzz me in. Kevin didn't move. He looked down at his monitor, then up at Julian. He looked terrified. I can't do that, Mr. Thorne. What do you mean you can't? I'm the CEO. Not according to the memo we got at 8:30 p.m., sir, Kevin said, his voice trembling. General Order 44. Complete lockdown of executive suite. All credentials for Julian Thorne have been revoked pending an internal audit. An audit? Julian slammed his hand on the turnstile. Open this gate, Kevin, or you're fired. I can't, sir. Mrs. Thorne is the acting chairwoman. She said if I let you in, I'd be prosecuted for corporate espionage. Julian stared at the kid. He realized the terrifying efficiency of Eleanor's coup. She hadn't just taken the money. She had taken the infrastructure. She had weaponized the bureaucracy of his own company against him. Kevin, Julian said, his voice lowering to a desperate plea. I have personal items in my office. My medication. Photos of my daughter. Lies, mostly. It was cash and bearer bonds. Just let me go up for 5 minutes. I can't, sir. The elevators are locked out. You need a retinal scan to access the 60th floor, and your biometrics have been wiped from the system. Julian kicked the turnstile. A metallic clang echoed in the empty lobby. He turned around and saw Isabella standing outside the glass doors, watching him. She saw the red lights. She saw the refusal. She saw the king locked out of his castle. Julian walked back out to the street. He felt naked. Well, Isabella asked, did you get the money? Forget the money, Julian said, grabbing her hand. We need to go to the secondary location, the loft in Soho. It's under a shell company. Eleanor doesn't know about it. They got back into the taxi. Soho, Julian barked. You got cash? Gupta asked. I told you I'll get it when we get there. Gupta hit the brakes. Card cash now, right over. I am Julian Thorne. I am good for it. Card declined earlier, buddy. I saw the video, Gupta said, holding up his own phone. He had been watching the live stream while waiting. Get out. Julian and Isabella were dumped on the corner of 5th Avenue and 52nd Street. It started to rain, a cold, miserable drizzle that seemed cliched but felt personal. This is insane, Isabella screamed, her hair beginning to dampen. I am wearing a $20,000 dress and I'm standing in the rain. It's an adventure, Julian said, trying to summon a manic optimism. We'll look back on this and laugh. I'm not laughing, Julian. I'm hungry. I'm cold. And I look like a drowned rat. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time, without the filter of his billions. He looked old. The stress lines around his eyes were deep. His dyed hair was looking flat in the rain. Without the suit, the office, the power. He was just a middle-aged man having a breakdown. Give me the ring, Julian said suddenly. Isabella clutched her left hand to her chest. What? The ring, Julian said, his eyes darting around the street. It's worth 500 grand. We can pawn it. Just for tonight. To get cash, get a hotel suite, get a lawyer. I'll buy you a bigger one next week. You want to pawn my engagement ring? Isabella asked, horrified. Minutes after you proposed? It's an asset, Bella. We need liquidity. He reached for her hand. No. She pulled back. You're crazy. This is my ring. You gave it to me. I bought it. Give it to me. They were wrestling on the corner of 5th Avenue. A couple of tourists stopped to watch. One of them pulled out a phone. Is that the guy from the video? A teenager asked. Hey, it's the broke billionaire. Run, Julian whispered. He grabbed Isabella's hand and dragged her down the block, away from the cameras, away from the mocking laughter. They found shelter under the awning of a Duane Reade pharmacy. The neon lights flickered above them. Julian slumped against the brick wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the dirty concrete. He put his head in his hands. Isabella looked down at him. The disgust on her face was total. I'm going to my sister's, she said coldly. Bella, don't leave me. Not tonight. My sister lives in Queens, Isabella said. It's a studio apartment. There's no room for you. But we're engaged. Isabella looked at the ring. She looked at Julian. Call me when the accounts are unfrozen, she said. If they ever are. She turned and walked into the rain, heading toward the subway station. Julian watched her go. The red silk dress, now soaked and dark, disappeared into the night. He was alone. No wife, no mistress, no home, no money. He checked his pockets. He had a phone with 12% battery. He had a pack of mints. And he had a pocket square. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, the lawyer who had betrayed him. Subject, personal effects message. Eleanor has authorized a courier to drop off a care package for you at the concierge of the Motel 6. It contains one change of clothes, your heart medication, and a check for $500. She suggests you use it for legal counsel, though she doubts it will cover the retainer. Good luck, Julian. Julian stared at the screen. He threw the phone into a puddle. It shattered. Morning came to New York City with a brightness that felt cruel. Julian had not slept at the Motel 6. He hadn't even gone there. His pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, he had spent the night in the 24-hour lobby of a hospital, pretending to wait for a patient until a nurse kindly asked him to leave at 6 a.m. He looked like a wreck. His tuxedo was wrinkled and stained. His beard stubble was gray. He usually shaved twice a day. He walked down 47th Street, the Diamond District. The street was waking up. Metal grates were rolling up. Gold and gems sparkled in the windows, mocking his poverty. He had retrieved his phone from the puddle. Miraculously, it still worked, though the screen was cracked like a spiderweb. He had one goal today: find a lawyer who would take his case on contingency. He needed a shark, a killer. He walked into the office of Slater and Associates, a firm located above a deli that smelled of pastrami. It wasn't the white shoe firm he was used to, but Harvey Slater was known for being a legal pit bull who hated big corporations. Julian sat in the waiting room, squeezed between a man wearing a neck brace and a woman shouting into her phone about a slip and fall. "Mr. Thorne?" Harvey Slater stood in the doorway. He was a short man with a comb-over and a cheap suit, but his eyes were sharp. Come in. I saw the news. A tragedy. A Greek tragedy." Julian sat in the creaky leather chair. "I want to sue her, Harvey. I want to sue her for everything. Constructive eviction, theft of assets, defamation, emotional distress." "Slow down, Tiger," Harvey said, leaning back and lighting a cigar, which was illegal in the building, but Harvey didn't seem to care. "I've looked at the filings." Eleanor moved fast. She filed in New York, London, and the Cayman Islands simultaneously. She has a team of 60 lawyers working around the clock. "I don't care," Julian said. "I have the prenup." "The prenup with the moral turpitude clause?" Harvey chuckled. "Julian, you proposed to your mistress on a live stream. You didn't just violate the clause. You danced on its grave. The judge isn't going to look at the contract. He's going to look at the YouTube video." "So what are you saying? I'm destitute?" "Not destitute," Harvey said, "but you're in a liquidity crisis. You have assets, sure, but they are tied up in the trust. To unlock them, we need to prove Eleanor is incompetent or malicious. That takes time and money, which brings me to my fee." "I can't pay you right now," Julian admitted, "but I'll give you 20% of the settlement. That could be $50 million. Harvey tapped his pen on the desk. "I don't work on could best, Julian. I need a retainer, $25,000. Cash or wire?" Julian slumped. "I don't have it." Harvey stood up. "Then I can't help you. Try the Legal Aid Society. They're down the block." Julian walked out of the office, his last hope extinguishing. He stood on the street corner, feeling the vibration of the subway below. Then his phone buzzed. It was Isabella. "Julian, we need to talk. Meet me at Goldman's Pawn and Jewelry on 6th. Now." Julian's heart leaped. She wanted to help. She was going to pawn the ring to pay for the lawyer. He knew she loved him. It wasn't just about the money. He ran the 3 blocks to the pawn shop. He burst through the door, a bell jingling. The shop was narrow and cluttered. Behind the bulletproof glass stood a large man with a loop in his eye. Isabella was standing at the counter, her back to Julian. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, trying to look inconspicuous. "Bella!" Julian gasped, out of breath. "You're doing the right thing. Harvey Slater wants 25 grand. We can get that for the ring easily." Isabella turned around. She looked pale, sickly. "Julian," she said, her voice trembling. "He says it's fake." Julian froze. "What?" He walked to the counter. "What are you talking about? That's a Graf diamond." "I paid $300,000 for it," the pawnbroker spat into a cup. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you think you paid. But the stone in that setting? It's cubic zirconia. High grade, sure. Maybe worth $200 for the setting. But the rock is glass." Julian stared at the ring sitting on the velvet pad. "That's impossible. I have the certificate of authenticity." "Did you pick it up yourself?" the pawnbroker asked. "Or did you have someone else pick it up?" Julian's mind flashed back to 3 days ago. He had been busy with the merger. He had sent his assistant, Brenda. The woman, Eleanor said, despised him. "Oh, my God," Julian whispered. "She switched it. Brenda, switch the stone." Isabella grabbed the ring. "You gave me a fake ring?" she screamed, her face twisting into ugliness. "You publicly proposed to me with glass?" "I didn't know." "Eleanor must have got to Brenda. It's a setup." "You are a joke, Julian," Isabella yelled. She threw the ring at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the dirty floor. "I'm done. Do you hear me? I'm done." She stormed out of the shop. Julian knelt down and picked up the ring. He looked at it under the harsh fluorescent light. It sparkled mockingly. The pawnbroker looked at him with pity. I'll give you $50 for the gold weight. Julian looked at the man. $50? Take it or leave it. Julian took the $50. He walked out onto the street. He bought a bottle of cheap whiskey and sat on a park bench in Bryant Park. He took a swig. The burn was comforting. He watched the people walking by, businessmen in suits, tourists with cameras. He used to be the master of this universe. Now he was just a spectator. But as the alcohol hit his bloodstream, a cold, hard rage began to replace the despair. Eleanor thought she had won. She thought she had stripped him of everything. But she had forgotten one thing. Julian Thorne didn't play by the rules. And if he couldn't win in the boardroom, he would win in the gutter. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 10 years, a number for a man named Victor who operated out of Brighton Beach, a man who specialized in asset recovery and problem-solving that lawyers wouldn't touch. "Victor," Julian said when the line connected. "It's Thorne. I have a job for you. It involves a woman. And a lot of hidden money." Brighton Beach felt like a different planet compared to the polished marble of Manhattan. The air smelled of brine and old frying oil. The subway ride had taken an hour, during which Julian had sobered up enough to feel the throbbing headache of a hangover, but not enough to lose the reckless confidence that had brought him here. He sat in the back booth of Odessa, a dimly lit restaurant where the menu was in Cyrillic and the patrons looked like they wrestled bears for sport. Julian nervously adjusted his stained tuxedo collar. He looked out of place, a fallen aristocrat in a den of wolves. "You look terrible, Julian." Victor slid into the booth opposite him. Victor was a man made of granite and scars. He wore a leather jacket that cost more than Julian's current net worth. They had known each other from a murky real estate deal 15 years ago, a deal where Julian had needed tenants encouraged to leave a building he wanted to develop. Victor had handled it. "I've had a bad 24 hours, Julian said, his voice raspy. "I need a favor." Victor signaled the waitress for vodka. "I saw the news. Your wife, she is a very smart woman. Dangerous." "She got lucky," Julian spat. "She caught me off guard. But she missed something. Something big." "Oh?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" Julian leaned in, lowering his voice. "The red ledger." Victor paused, the glass of vodka halfway to his mouth. "I thought that was a myth." "It's real," Julian whispered. "It's a physical book. No digital trace. It contains the details of every bribe, every offshore kickback, every regulatory shortcut Thorne Enterprises has taken in the last decade. It's my insurance policy. It's also my leverage." "Where is it?" "It's in the floor safe, in the penthouse master closet. Eleanor doesn't know the combination. It's analog, a dial. Only I know the numbers." "And what do you want me to do?" "I need you to get me inside," Julian said. "The building is on lockdown, high-end security. But you have guys who specialize in bypassing high-end security. If I get that book, I can blackmail the board. I can force them to reinstate me. Or I can sell the book to the feds for immunity and watch Eleanor go down for managing a corrupt company." Victor took a slow sip of vodka. He studied Julian's desperate eyes. "You want to break into your own house to steal evidence of your own crimes to blackmail your wife, who currently owns everything," Victor summarized. "It's the only play I have left," Julian said. "Help me and I'll give you $5 million once I'm back on top." Victor remained silent for a long time. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking glasses, low laughter, seemed to fade away. $5 million, Victor said thoughtfully. "That is a good number. But there is a problem, Julian." "What problem?" "The risk. If we get caught, it's burglary, corporate espionage, maybe worse." "We won't get caught," Julian insisted. "Tonight is the aftermath of the gala. Eleanor will be celebrating. The penthouse will be empty. The security staff is distracted by the media circus downstairs. It's the perfect window." Victor pulled out a phone. He tapped a few buttons. I have a team. 2 men. Professionals. They can bypass the biometric locks on the service elevator. We can be in and out in 20 minutes. Julian felt a surge of triumph. Let's do it. But, Victor added, his eyes hardening, I want something up front. Collateral. I told you, I have nothing. You have the watch, Victor said, pointing to the Patek Philippe on Julian's wrist. It was the one asset Eleanor hadn't stripped yet. And the shoes. Those are alligator, yes? Julian looked down at his watch. It was a gift from his father. It was worth $80,000. Fine, Julian growled. He unclasped the watch and slid it across the table. Victor pocketed it. Meet us in the alley behind 432 Park Avenue at 2 a.m. Don't be late. The hours between the meeting and the heist were an eternity. Julian wandered the streets, avoiding the well-lit avenues where he might be recognized. He felt like a ghost haunting the city he used to rule. At 1:55 a.m., he stood in the shadows of the alleyway behind his skyscraper. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. A black van pulled up silently. The side door slid open. 2 men in tactical black gear sat inside. Victor was in the passenger seat. Get in, Victor said. Julian climbed in. The van smelled of ozone and tension. The service elevator override is active, one of the men said, looking at a laptop. We have a 10-minute loop on the cameras. They moved with terrifying efficiency. They bypassed the loading dock security, hacked the keypad, and within minutes, Julian was ascending in the service elevator toward the 82nd floor. His heart pounded against his ribs like a trapped bird. This is it, he thought. The comeback. The elevator doors pinged softly and opened into the utility room of the penthouse. It was dark. The massive apartment was silent. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a view that belonged to him. Clear, the tactical leader whispered. Julian rushed past them, his shoes squeaking on the hardwood. He headed straight for the master bedroom. He burst into the walk-in closet, which was larger than most Manhattan apartments. He fell to his knees in the corner, pulling up the rug. There it was, the floor safe. His hands shook as he spun the dial. Right 34, left 12, right 55. Click. The heavy steel door popped open. Julian reached into the dark void of the safe. He felt for the leather-bound book. His hand touched nothing but cold steel. He frowned. He reached deeper. Empty. No, he whispered. No, 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 no. He grabbed his phone and used the flashlight. The safe was completely empty. Looking for this, Julian? The lights in the bedroom blazed on, blinding him. Julian spun around, shielding his eyes. Sitting in the velvet armchair in the corner of the bedroom was Eleanor. She was wearing a silk robe and drinking a cup of tea. She looked completely relaxed. But she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Isabella. And sitting on the bed, looking bored, was Victor. Julian blinked, trying to process the tableau before him. His brain misfired. Victor? Isabella? Eleanor? Together? Victor? Julian stammered, looking at the Russian. What are you doing? Victor shrugged, taking a sip of tea from a delicate china cup. Business, Julian. Just business. Mrs. Thorne made me a better offer. 10 million. And she paid up front. Wire transfer. You sold me out, Julian screamed. I gave you my father's watch. A nice bonus. Victor grinned. Julian turned to Isabella. And you? Bella, what are you doing here? You left me. You hated me. Isabella laughed. It wasn't the girlish, seductive giggle she used when she wanted jewelry. It was a deep, throaty, cynical laugh. Oh, Julian, she said, dropping the accent. She sounded different, smarter. My name isn't Isabella. It's Sarah. I'm an actress. I was an off-Broadway understudy until Eleanor hired me for the role of a lifetime. Julian felt the room spin. Role? What role? The role of the greedy mistress, Eleanor interjected, setting her tea down. You see, Julian, I've known about your affairs for years. The secretaries, the interns. I tolerated them because they were discreet, but then I found the red ledger. She reached under her chair and pulled out the black leather book. Julian's eyes widened. I found it 6 months ago. Eleanor continued. I read every page. I realized that if I just divorced you, you would hide your assets. You would use this dirty money to fight me in court for years. You would bury me in legal fees. I needed a way to void the prenup and strip you of your credibility at the same time. So you hired her? Julian pointed at Sarah/Isabella. I created the perfect trap, Eleanor said calmly. I needed you to violate the moral turpitude clause publicly. I needed you to be so infatuated, so arrogant, that you would destroy yourself on camera. Sarah was perfect. She played to your ego. She made you feel like a king so you wouldn't notice you were being checkmated. Every text I sent you, Sarah added, smirking, was drafted by Eleanor. Every demand for the ring, the public proposal, it was all scripted. Even the ring being fake, that was my idea. Why waste real money on a prop? You, Julian choked on the word. You manipulated me. For 6 months? I directed you, Eleanor corrected. And you gave an Oscar-worthy performance. Julian looked around the room. He was trapped. But then a flash of his old malice returned. Fine, Julian sneered. You tricked me. But you have the ledger now. If you turn that in, the company goes down. Your stock value goes to 0. You lose everything too, Eleanor. You won't use it. Eleanor smiled. It was a sad, final smile. That's where you're wrong, Julian. I'm not keeping the company. What? I sold my controlling interest in Thorne Enterprises an hour ago, Eleanor said, to a private equity firm that specializes in liquidating corrupt assets. I sold at the bottom, sure, but I'm still walking away with $300 million. Clean. Legal. Yours. And the ledger? Julian asked, his voice trembling. I'm not turning it in, Eleanor said. She tossed the book onto the bed next to Julian. I'm giving it to them. The bedroom door opened. 4 agents and FBI windbreakers walked in. They had their guns drawn, but pointed at the floor. They didn't need to shoot. The target was broken. Julian Thorne, the lead agent said, stepping forward. You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Julian looked at the FBI agents. He looked at Victor, who was checking his watch. He looked at Sarah, who was removing her fake eyelashes. And he looked at Eleanor. Why? Julian whispered. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just leave me? Eleanor stood up. She walked over to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, the same perfume she had worn for 20 years. Because, Julian, she whispered, you didn't just cheat on me. You forgot who I was. You thought I was furniture. You thought I was weak. I wanted to show you and the world exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman who runs your life. She turned to the FBI agent. He's all yours. The agents grabbed Julian. They cuffed his hands behind his back. The cold metal bit into his wrists. As they dragged him out of the penthouse, past the luxury furniture he had bought, past the art he had collected, he saw one last thing. A young woman walked out of the bathroom. It was his daughter, Sophie. She had flown in from London. Sophie, Julian cried out. Sophie, help me, tell them. Sophie looked at her father. Her eyes were dry. She held up her phone. She was recording him. Say hi to the subscribers, Dad, Sophie said coldly. Mom promised me the exclusive rights to the documentary. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the light, shutting out the luxury, and sealing Julian Thorne in the darkness he had built for himself. And that is how Julian Thorne went from a billionaire on a balcony to an inmate in a federal cell in less than 24 hours. He thought money made him untouchable, but he forgot the most important rule of power. Never betray the person who knows where the bodies are buried. Eleanor didn't just want a divorce. She wanted a legacy, and she got it. Julian is currently serving 15 years, and Eleanor? She's living in Tuscany, and rumor has it she just bought a vineyard with cash. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma and high-stakes revenge, smash that like button right now. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Eleanor went too far, or did Julian get exactly what he deserved? I'll see you in the next video.